Hey everyone, it's commentary time. Hopefully, you've had an opportunity to listen to the previous episode with my friend Nate Bosher. And I want to touch on a couple of the topics that Nate brought up during that conversation that I think are really important to reiterate. The first big one, and we're going to talk about this just for a couple minutes, is knowing when to pull the plug on a project. And I think this is a big one for a lot of us, me as well, is when do you pull the plug on a project? And I want to start this whole conversation with projects where I didn't know when to pull the plug. So a long time ago, year 2013, 2014, 2015, around that time, I was working on a startup. It was called Winsitter, and myself and a very good friend of mine, Brett Fisher, who was a previous guest on the show, we were working on a startup that we were building software to help system administrators manage Windows servers in production. And this is kind of at the onset of the cloud everywhere, everyone moving to the cloud, moving everything to the cloud. And it was a really solid idea, but Brett and I really had difficulty marketing it and figuring out who we were going to try to sell it to. And every time Brett and I would get together, it was like, all right, what's the next thing we need to work on? And the answer all the time was always marketing. Like, we needed to work on marketing, but we didn't want to work on marketing. We wanted to work on the technical problems. Like, oh, I could go add another feature that does X, Y, and Z. And it's easy for us as developers to dive in and solve the technical problems, but we really don't want to solve the problems that we should be working on. To bring this back to the point, working on Winsitter day after day after day, and we did this for months, and months turned into years. And Brett and I would always get together and go, is this done? Like, should we just shut this down? We have a handful of paying customers. There's money coming in, but it's not what people would call FU money. Like, there's no quitting your job. There's no quitting your livelihood to go all in on that product. And we let this go on way too long. Eventually, 2 years probably after we should have pulled the plug, Brett and I had the conversation. Should we pull the plug on this and go work on something different for a change? And the answer to that was yes. Yeah, we had to go work on something else. So we didn't finish that when we should have. And lessons learned. So let's bring that to the future and to the current, to the present. And I'm working on Multithreaded Income with my very good friends, Sean Marin and Chad Carter. We have this vision of being able to help developers figure out how to insure themselves against future job loss. How do you build multiple threads of income so you're never looking for a job at the wrong moment? Don't ever find yourself at a point where you don't have income from any source. You are a super talented person. Why don't you take that talent and go do something with it? And hopefully we're helping you if you've been listening to the show. But multi-threaded income is time boxed, because while I love helping people, there has to be an eventual point where this entity makes some money. And we have a variety of different ways that we're planning on doing that. We're having that hard conversation. When is the point with multi-threaded income that we pull the plug? So you're listening to this episode at whatever time, but I'm recording it on November 15th, 2023. And there is a time box that says when we get to February of 2024, a couple hard decisions are going to have to be made. If we haven't made significant progress in bringing dollars into the business, it is fun to work on things. I love working on side projects, but dedicating an extravagant amount of your time to a side project that's not producing any fruits is sometimes not time well spent. So multi-threaded income, coming back to this, I love doing multi-threaded income. I love the people I interview. I love the people out in the community that I'm talking to and I'm learning from and I'm helping teach. That all brings me joy. But there are a considerable number of things in this life that bring me joy. So if I find myself in the next 3-4 months, and I know Sean and Chad feel the exact same way, if we find ourselves in this position where multi-threaded income is taking up time, but it's not producing the end result, the return on investment, which is money, we need to cut that out of our lives. So coming back to the Nate conversation, Nate really touched on this. Like, let's make sure that when we're evaluating different things that we're doing, that we have outs. We know when enough is enough. We have done what we could with a project. And don't be afraid to say no. Like, no is the most powerful word you can possibly use in your career. Feel free to say no to things. There's a famous saying somewhere, and I don't remember what it's from. I've heard it in 15,000 different contexts. But when you are evaluating anything in your life, if it's not a hell yes, it needs to be a no. So at the moment, multi-threaded income, this is hell yes. I love doing this. Let's talk more about making developers financially independent. And yeah, let's talk more about that. So if I'm still around in March, you know that something has succeeded. If I'm not, you know it's failed. But that's because we probably time boxed the experiment to move on. The next topic that Nate touched on that I think is worth talking a little bit more is around the concept of consulting. So I'm a consultant. Chad's a consultant. Sean's doing consulting as well. A lot of you out there are probably thinking about, looking forward to getting into independent consulting. I want to start freelancing. I want to start doing this work on the side. And I 100% think everyone should do a little bit of freelancing on the side. Just to get some breadth of skill set. The biggest benefit to consulting is primarily you work with a variety of different clients and customers, and they all have different problems and they're all different people. So you don't get siloed into working with a particular team in a particular way, because no two companies operate in the exact same way. I've worked with everything from military to Fortune 50 companies to little mom and pop shops. And they all have a different way of thinking about businesses and how different folks in the business should operate. So it's good for you to just kind of work with different people and build up that skill set. Now, on top of that, you might pick up additional skills in tech that you might not necessarily have had before. So spend some time and do a little bit of freelancing. I love how Nate uses consulting though, because ultimately, like, Nate wants to use consulting just to fund his future projects. And I don't think this is a topic that really anyone else on the show has gone too deeply in, is that you are capable of buying your own time. When I do consulting work, I get paid for that. And I take that money and I put it into a bank account. It's used to pay for the things that I pay for. But I could also use a little bit of that money to pay for my time on other projects. For example, if I had a product idea, a SaaS that I wanted to work on, I could easily pay myself to work on that by not taking consulting work, but just kind of eating into the coffers of the consulting work that I had done previously. And that's exactly what Nate does. He does enough consulting to fund the product work that he wants to do. I think that's really a cool concept for anyone out there. You're working on your day job, you start doing some freelancing on the side, you're going to start building those coffers up. And eventually you can get to the point where maybe the freelancing or the consulting takes over, and that can become your full-time job. Well, now you can decide that to the side and start working on something else. Going back to my previous conversation about Winsitter, when I was doing Winsitter, I basically funded the Winsitter time with consulting time that I had on the side. So 80% of my time was consulting, and then 20% of my time was Winsitter. And it leads into another big thing that I think Nate was hitting on, is that eventually, as a consultant or a freelancer or a product producer, you have 100% control over your time. When when do you wake up? When do you go to your computer? When do you take a break? Do you want to take a long lunch? Do you want to go out to coffee with someone? These are all things that you can't really easily do when you're working a W-2 full-time job. You don't have full control over your schedule, at least not as much as you might want. I just got back from a business retreat with a group of friends in Austin, Texas, and I just took a couple days off. And what I did was I told my clients I was working with, like, hey, just quick FYI, I'm not going to be available Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'll check Slack periodically, but I'm not going to be productive. Nothing getting done that week. Take care, and I'll see you when I get back. That's the type of control over my time I want. I want to be able to go to kids' baseball games or any event that they have going on. I can do that. I don't have to ask permission. I just go do it. It's this kind of holy grail of I can do literally whatever I want. Now, the downside of a lot of cases is if I'm not working, I'm not making money. But I can selectively choose when those times are. If I don't want to work past 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I don't work past 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's completely up to me to control my time 100%. So I'm going to put out a question to the Multithreaded Income community. How would you like it if you could control 100% of your time? What would you do differently? And how can the Multithreaded Income community help you by achieving some of those goals? So thank you all so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you on next week's episode. Thanks for listening to the Multithreaded Income Podcast. I've been your host, Kevin Griffin. Please reach out to us on social media at MT Income, wherever you get your socials from. And feel free to join one of our upcoming challenges at multithreadedincome.com. We'll see you next time.